Shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Kifa, and welcome to another edition of the Lion's Den. Today, I have the honor and privilege of having Rabbi Simon, my teacher here, from all the way across the pond from the UK. So we give thanks to the Most High for that. Today, we want to come at you at an angle that is very popular amongst worldwide and amongst all the believers out there who say they believe in the Bible. And we're going to look at what they call the New Testament, or the renewed contract as we know it as Hebrews. And we're going to examine some of the books there, and we're going to look at the history of the true history and see if it aligns up. And this is a question that we need to ask ourselves going forward is, when you go to examine anything, you must always look at the facts. When you go see your doctor, you want to know what's wrong with you and why do you hurt there and what remedies can be readily available to you. Same way when you're examining your spiritual faith, you want to make sure that you have a baseline and you're rooted on something that's concrete and not some just hearsay out there. It's very important. We know in the court cases that hearsay doesn't get you anywhere. Matter of fact, it get you behind bars just on hearsay. So we must look at and examine the facts. And we're going to do that today with Rabbi Simon, as he's going to bring forth some hidden truths out there that are going to be quite pertinent to you and very informative as well. So I welcome Rabbi Simon to the Lion's Den. Welcome,
Thank
Rabbi
you
Simon.
very much. Yeah, thank you, Rabbi Kifa. Well, yes, I mean the Book of Acts, and Book of Acts isn't the only book that we want to look at, but that's probably one of the prima facie ones that's come to my attention. And always when we examine anybody's faith, doesn't matter whose faith, we want to look at what's the baseline, what's the end result, where we should be. Now, clearly, there are people's names mentioned in the book, or all the books, of the Bible. If you want to call the Bible, all the books of the Bible. And we're talking about now the 66 books, not the 39 or the 24 books of the Bible that we call the Tanak. So we look at the names for a start. And one of the questions that I have at the very beginning, because we have a Hebrew culture. And the Hebrew culture basically says that you have a patronym, father's name, son's name. In other words, you'll have a son, so you'll say something like, you'll say Rabbi Simon ben Eli, he is a son of Eli. So for instance, so you know where I stand. So if you want to trace my line, you find out who Eli is, who's Eli's father, Yosef, then who's Yosef's father, etc. So you go like that. Now, in this particular scenario, one of the troubling issues that we have with the so-called New Testament is that where are all the patronyms? Where are the fathers' names? So if we start looking at Matthew, for instance, the first book that they purport to be the New Testament, who is his father? We know that it's called Matthew Lavi, so who's the father? So some guy called Lavi is from a tribe called the Levites, which we understand the priestly tribe, and then but nothing is given. You see. Then we look at Yahuchanan, John. John is given a name such as Gospel of John, but where's his father? We don't learn that John is actually belonging to some man called Zabdi. So Zabdi is his father. Again, no details are presented to us. Then we look at Luke. Who's Luke's father? Nothing given. We don't know nothing about Luke. So then you look at Mark. Nothing about Mark. So then the question to ask, and look at the book of Acts, for instance. We're not looking at the other letters, but let's just look at the book of Acts. But before we look at the book of Acts, we want to ask the question, what happened to the patronyms? Why wasn't the book introduced as saying, this is the book of John, this is the book of Yahuchanan, who was the son of Ben Zabdi? Why wasn't it written like that? So clearly, what I see is, there's two things at play here. There's deception at play here. Let's be honest. And one of the things that I see problematic is that I can be intellectually honest. I can be honest with the folks out there and tell them exactly what my opinion is on the matter, or I can be intellectually dishonest and I can go around the matter and say, no, well, kind of color it and make it sound like it's okay when it's not okay, and I can deceive people like that.
Yeah.
So my fundamental issue with Christendom is Christianity at base is intellectually dishonest. That's my first issue with Christianity generally. So then we take it on face value and we start to examine the books, and especially the book of Acts as one book which is supposed to have historicity in it, names in it.
Yes.
And we generally, when I say we, not generally me, but the scholars out there, they date that book to around 62 CE, or the Common Era. So if it's 62 CE, in Acts chapter 6, we have a story of somebody that they translate into the English vernacular, this guy called Stephen. Well, Stephen is not a Hebrew name. So we have a man with the Hebrew name of Sophania. So Sophania is a man whose name they called Stephen, and he appears on the scene, a Hellenist Jew, and this man is basically brought to the council, and this man is stoned to death, is sentenced to death.
Right.
And you can read the history of that man in the book of Acts chapter 6:5 in the King James Version, which says, and the saying pleased the whole multitude, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and the Holy Ghost, and Philip and Prochorus. Right, this is from the King James edition. And Nicanor and Timon and Parmenas and Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch. We know Antioch wasn't in Israel. We know that's a province of what was then the empire, the Grecian, generally Grecian Empire. So it was a province today that will fall into Turkey. And so we also note that it says that we notice that this man's, one of the things in 6:8 that is mentioned in chapter 6 verse 8 of Acts is that this is a man supposedly full of faith and full of great miracles. Well, one of the questions that I ask is, let me introduce to you a man called Musa, who the Jews call Moshe. So we introduce Musa ben Amram, his father's name. Well, does it ever tell you anywhere in the Torah that here is a man, Moses, full of faith and does great miracles? Does it say that?
It doesn't say that.
Why does it then say it for this man? So that's one of the questions, is why are you highlighting an aspect of a person's life according to not the works that is done, but according to the miracles that is done? So you're basically highlighting miracles. Why? Because you're now being intellectually dishonest with people, because you're not telling people that this man commits to the Torah.
Yeah.
You're basically saying that this man actually commits to the miracles. So one of the things that I think I need to highlight is, one of the things that if Christians believe in their Jesus, if the Messianics believe in their Messiah, Yeshua, then we need to highlight the case that one of the things that very Messiah they believe in said, that don't look at signs and wonders.
Right.
Then why is this particular writer of Acts, by the way, which is not Luke, but it's attested to be Luke, why does he highlight the fact two things are problematic? Number one, there's no patronym. Stephen, Sophania, has got no father.
Right.
So somebody clearly omitted the father's name, and it was a Christian scribe. Let's be intellectually honest about this. Secondly, it's mentioned an aspect of miracles, not Torah. It doesn't say this man Sophania, this man Stephen was a great man, he went to synagogue, he attended synagogue 7 days a week, he attended petitions 3 times a day. It doesn't say that. None of those aspects are mentioned, but what is mentioned is some complete irrelevant aspect of his faith, which is miracles. So my question is this. So my question as a teacher of the Torah and as a Levite is this, is that why should I concentrate on somebody's miracles? Shouldn't I be looking at his works, deeds of the Torah? Because one of the deeds of the Torah is this, that you will do the actions of the Torah. What's one of the actions of the Torah? One of the actions of the Torah is to be a merciful, kind person. It's one of the actions of the Torah. So you be merciful to others. So surely, if you're merciful to others, then people will think, right? Oh, one of the actions of the Torah is to keep Sabbath every week, every Saturday. But that doesn't mean that you live the Torah. Many people keep the Sabbath. 7-day Adventists keep the Sabbath. Does that make them Torah keepers?
Right.
It doesn't. The Jews keep the Sabbath. Does that Sabbath keeping make them Torah keepers? No, it doesn't. Because what makes you a Torah keeper is how you walk, how you live your life, how you work your life. That's what it makes it. So what I'm finding difficulty with the book of Acts is, number one, is that it's purported to be written by Luke. But if Luke was a Hebrew man, which again the Gentiles make him a Gentile, if he was a Hebrew man, which technically he is, which he is actually, as I written in my book, Beit Yehoshua, then why is this alleged Luke in Acts? Why have we got 2 versions of Acts? Number one, we have 2 versions of Acts. Number 2, we have this man Stephen's miracles being highlighted, not about the Torah works. Yet the allegation against him is that he is decrying the Torah of Moses. That's his allegation against him. It's basically sedition. Sedition of Israel. Sedition of Israel means death sentence, right? You're not permitted to do that. But it's very problematic for me because one of the things that I notice is that they bring him to a council. We're talking about the Sanhedrin over here.
Right.
We're not talking about just any council. So this council that they brought before, and a high priest name is mentioned. Caiaphas' name is mentioned at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So if Caiaphas' name is mentioned, I will show you the evidence as well, because in Acts chapter 6 verse 9 it says that certain of the synagogue, which is called of the Libertines and Crenians and Alexandrians, and of them Cilicia and Asia, disputing with Stephen. So Stephen had a dispute with his synagogue people. You know, what do synagogue people do?
They teach Torah.
Exactly. So what was the dispute then? So allegedly this Stephen character, if they want to make him Christian as Gentiles do, let them make him Christian. Let's judge him as a Christian then. So as a Christian, the charge against him was that he's anti-Torah. The charge, if for instance, if that charge was valid, we'll look into that if the charge is valid in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So what we'll look at is then basically, the question was asked him that is this man is being blasphemous against what Moses wrote. So in other words, the charge was that he is writing stuff which is anti-Torah. So the charge, if we accept the charge and we accept this man is there, then the problem that we now face is that it says that there false witnesses were brought against him. I have a great deal of issue with this false witnesses, because you have a council in Israel where this man is brought, a high priest is summoned in the council. We know the high priest, and the book of Acts will tell you as well, is Caiaphas. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So we have two big issues. The first issue, who is the Stephen character? Where did he come out from? Where did he live? Who is his father?
It's his father.
I got no evidence to suggest even for a second that this man even existed. Right? That's my first problem. Second problem is his father's name was omitted, which means if this character existed, why was his father's name removed? That means a Christian scribe has deliberately inserted an account which doesn't exist, number one. Or you could say that if it existed, deliberately his father's name was removed so it can't be traced.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go for the first premise, that the man doesn't exist. Why? Because if the man was full of the Spirit, full of the Ruach, then he should be Torah keeper, not Torah breaker.
Right.
You see, if he's been brought for against a charge, then what I see happening over here is that we are now juxtaposed between Christianity of the first century and we're juxtaposed against Judaism of the first century. So what's happening now is that this man, supposedly they're making him sound like he's Christian.
Right.
Because he's against the Torah.
Right.
Right? But did this person of the Messiah, Yahushua, or Yeshua, did he at any point say that Christianity is now the main religion? Judaism is no longer the valid faith. So that's the question I would say. So obviously we don't have any evidence of that.
Right.
Now, any evidence of the purported Messiah who's saying that Judaism is finished, Christianity is now going to be the religion to carry my name forward, or carry the name of the Most High,
Right.
the God of Israel.
Right.
So then I look at it, I examine it, and I come to a conclusion based on the evidence that there are a number of issues with this account. Number one, we can't trace Stephen. Number two, the high priest and the council's been slandered and defamed. Because when you say that such and such high priest rose up, and such high priest said this, and such council said that, and if that council didn't stand up, if they didn't say those things, you're defaming them, you're slandering them. Slander is not permitted. So what we are seeing here is a classical act of Christian slander against a person of the high priest and his prodigy, the priests under him, the rabbis, the teachers, etc.,
judges, yes.
everybody.
Yes. Yes.
But the big problem isn't just the slander. I'm going to give you the big problem, historicity. The big problem is historicity. Historically, did Caiaphas rule as a priest at that moment in time when Stephen was being stoned, allegedly? Because there are two issues. Did Caiaphas rule as a high priest? The answer is no. He wasn't the high priest at that time.
At the time of Acts, when this event happened.
He wasn't the high priest. Okay? How do we verify that? We go to the book of Josephus Flavius. He has written the Wars of the Jews, Histories of the Jews, Antiquity of the Jews. We have those. So he tells us clearly who were the high priests at those times. And guess what? Christianity again does what? It's double face. It changes those around. It messes up with patronyms. It removes the patronym of Caiaphas. Caiaphas, by the way, Caiaphas' real name was Joseph. So again, you see, what the Christians did, they edited the book of Joseph Lewis. They edited it so people couldn't recognize it. Even people like Eusebius in the 4th century, they were doing the same thing. So Christianity has a history of lying, deceptive behavior, and intellectual dishonesty. No Christian can stand before me anywhere in the world and say, we haven't done that. And I'll prove it, they've done it. So, I have the evidence to prove it otherwise. So what we look at is there's two issues here now. Number one, Stephen character doesn't exist. We just created a character.
Right.
We created a character, we raised it up against a council, and we've now said that this council is evil, is wicked, because it allowed this man to be stoned to death. What's the problem with stoning to death? Here's the problem. They were not allowed to do that. The Jews at the time, the Yehudim at the time of this particular event, Romans were in charge. If you had a man who was seditious against your faith, what you had to do after you examined him that he was seditious, you had to hand him to the Romans. The Romans will deal with him. You will not kill him. You will not kill that man. You had no right to kill that man. By saying that the high priest allowed this man to be killed, stoned to death, it means that when you're saying the high priest is directly responsible for that. You see, do you remember a particular incident when the so-called Paul of Tarsus apologizes to the high priest
Indeed.
for calling him a white wall?
Indeed.
Because he even knew that he shouldn't have said that.
Who did they turn the Master Yahushua over to?
Yeah, Caiaphas, high priest.
There you go.
So we got to look at the evidence, and we got to see that in this particular scenario, if Stephen existed and Stephen is being charged with the sedition of the law, that's a serious charge.
Yes.
That he's teaching people not to obey the Torah and follow this other religious faith, and follow after this other man that they're calling the Messiah. So then what we have is an issue with these characters being raised up as religious characters, and this character made to look like Christian, he's Stephen. This character is made to look like he's Jewish, he is a Yehudim, he is Caiaphas, and then Caiaphas is pitted against this man. But when we look at the history, the annals of history, we have a problem because Caiaphas didn't rule as a high priest at that time.
So we have a situation where we have a fictitious man, and then over here we have a high priest that never existed. At this time, this is imaginary.
Right. Because you may say, right, that how do we know that? Because let me give you something from Josephus, right? Because in Josephus' Antiquities, people to notice this. In Josephus' Antiquities, XX 197/203, Josephus tells us that they had no authority to take anybody's life at that time. He said the Romans would be onto you like a ton of bricks. The Romans would be onto you, and had that been done, they would have taken the high priesthood away. They would have killed a lot of Jews. That would have never been allowed to take place. So he said that the Jews at the time were not permitted to do such a thing. That would mean the dismemberment of the council. Do you think seriously that our people at that time would have allowed that to happen?
Of course not.
Who was not on the temple that dismembered the Sanhedrin?
Right.
So clearly this account tells us one thing, that this offense that's talked about in Acts chapter 6 and Acts chapter 7 never took place. This is an embellishment. This is a slander. This is defamation. If today this occurred, and if the Jews were to bring slanderous case against the Christians, they could take the Christians to court and say, you've defamed our high priest. It's defamation, and defamation is not permitted, and slander is not permitted.
Right.
So I see this as an exclusive case of slander and defamation of something that never took place, because this fictitious Stephen is created. This fictitious Stephen is created, and these fictitious miracles are created, because this is why the emphasis on miracles. Not on what Torah works he does. The emphasis is not on the fact that he goes to synagogue every day. He gives his tithe to the synagogue, tzedakah to the synagogue. No emphasis on that. The emphasis on miracles. So I like to see where it says in the Torah that my miracles will raise me up as a person of faith. That's my question.
The Master Yahushua said, "You will know them by their fruits, not by their miracles."
Right. Yeah. So we're looking at this account. So we find this problem with your so-called Book of Acts. So it's basically a falsification. It's something that never took place. Because what the scribe did, what the Christian scribe did, he knows that these people that are going to read this account, if I don't put patronyms down, they can't trace him. If they can't trace him, I can't be found. It's like I can put whatever I want to. who's going to trace it to me? Because I haven't put patronyms. If they try to trace Stephen, they can't. And you know what they did? They also removed Caiaphas' father's name. But how do we find Caiaphas' father's name? We go to the Antiquities of Josephus. When we go to the Antiquities of Josephus, we find the father's name.
So we have to look outside of the 66 canonized books
Yeah.
to really get an understanding.
That's right. So this is why we can never accept the New Testament as sacred text. It has embellished accounts. It has accounts in there that are falsifications. So therefore they are manufactured accounts. So this is not the only account that's manufactured. There's other manufacturing going on as well.
I believe you.
so we haven't even got time to look at that.
Right.
But this particular instance, apparently, and let me tell you something of fun, of real value. Acts chapter 4 verse 6 names the high priest, and it says that Annas the high priest and Caiaphas and John and Alexander and as many as were of the kindred of the high priest were gathered together at Jerusalem. There you have it, who the high priest was at the time. And then also there's something really funny happened. The other funny thing that happened was that apparently alleged Stephen's bones, they find anybody's bones in Israel today and they say, oh, this is Yeshua.
Yeah.
We found his bones.
Right.
Some of the people over there, they might say, we found a name called Yeshua.
Yeah.
This must be his bones.
Right.
So they do that. They try to, they try to rouse up the people's emotions, especially
Right.
Christians.
Right.
Because they don't believe that the bones are there. So what happens is that we find this particular person, Stephen, apparently no surprises that a Catholic bishop apparently found his bones.
Surprise, surprise.
400 years later. Everything happens about 500 years later in Christianity,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Nothing happens in the time. So they find his bones 4 centuries later. They cut up the bones, or they cut up the remains of what they find, and they dish them out to all their so-called Catholic dioceses, Catholic churches, and they venerate them. Now, let me ask a question. What do we consider somebody who's dead, who's a corpse? What do we consider touching the bones?
Unclean.
Yeah.
You're an unclean person.
Do you think that if we Hebrews are going to dish out, dead man's body
Like
or
some
dead
kind of
man's bones
souvenirs.
as a souvenir
Yeah.
to dish out to,
My goodness.
different churches,
Right.
different dioceses? That means that in order to validate their story, they had to find a fictitious Stephen's bones as well, in order to distribute them. So, they were already unclean for telling lies. Now
Yeah.
they're unclean for spreading this so-called corpse
Yeah.
of Stephen.
Right.
So that's the other problem. So apparently, the dugout remains of Stephen was sent into Europe. No wonder Europe is into so much debauchery,
Yeah. Absolutely.
uncleanness.
Absolutely.
So then we wonder why then they want to venerate this. They are giving this, dishing this out to Christians. They poor in spirit, in quotes.
Yes.
The poor in spirit didn't even realize that this man didn't exist.
Right.
And they have given an embellished story. They've been deceived intellectually and historically. And let's face it, Rabbi Kifa, how many Christians pick up the annals and histories of Rome and read it?
Yeah. True.
How many read that history?
Not many.
Not many.
None at all.
Maybe the majority is 99.99%.
Let's say that.
Maybe the
Let's say that.
0.1% may bother to pick up something like that.
Let's say that.
How many Christians actually have Josephus' Antiquities historical books?
Not many. Let's say that.
Let's say 99.99% again don't have it.
Right.
So we
Right.
have two issues over here. So we deal with this issue, and then one of the things I wanted to say, which I just wanted to throw in, just as a by the by, because I will tell you who the high priest was in a second, because we're talking about Caiaphas, and according to Josephus Flavius, according to his Antiquities and the Jewish War, between 52 to 66 CE, we had Jonathan son of Anan as a high priest.
Okay.
Between 52 to 56 we have Yishmael ben Favi as a high priest. According to him, between 56 to 61 we have Yosef ben Shimon as a high priest. 61 to 62 Anan son of Gamaliel. 63 to 66 Matthias ben Theophilus as a high priest. In other words, so when we look at these and examine this history, if the account of Caiaphas took place in 40, he was never high priest.
He was never high priest then.
No, he wasn't. Even if it took in 50, he wasn't high priest, 50 CE. So therefore, both dates don't match. So whichever Christian scribe alleged to be Luke was lying. He was intellectually being dishonest. He was trying to embellish an account, insert an account, and make raise the book of Acts to a level that it didn't belong to. And so this is how they used to deceive Christianity. And the other thing we find is that this account is purported, Acts chapter 7 verse 8, by the way, is purported to have happened in 40 CE. That's a problematic. because the other thing we note is that I just want to throw in something is that the character Paul, Paul of Tarsus, he brings in a statement in the letters that apparently he is a Roman citizen. Do you remember the incident when he's presented his statement
Absolutely.
to the Romans that he's a Roman citizen?
He's a Roman, yes.
Now, you can't just say that. You can't just say I'm a Roman citizen. Now, if I said at the airport I'm a British citizen, they'll say, where's your passport?
Right.
So I'll take my passport out and here's my British passport. So they're okay, so he's a British citizen. That's exactly what happened back then. You couldn't just say I'm a Roman citizen, because if you said that, then the person who's interviewing you, who stopped you, the commander would say, well, where's your citizenship? Where's your diploma of citizenship? And he'll have to produce it there and then. You see, so the difficulty we find is that Paul claims to be a Roman citizen, but he's never challenged with where's your citizenship proof? Where's your diploma of birth? So we know that you're a Roman citizen. Because the way the Roman citizenship qualified was that it came down from the Caesars all the way down, and they had to issue a diploma to a person who was made a Roman citizen. So that diploma carried weight wherever that person went, and then he would be able to show that diploma and say, I'm a Roman citizen.
Right.
But here's a difficulty. According to Jerome, one of the Christian writers, you call it Catholic, Christian, whatever you like, according to him, Paul wasn't born in Tarsus. He was born in Israel.
My goodness. The plot thickens.
Yeah. So the plot thickens, but so that's just giving you some historicity.
Yeah.
According to the nearest account of their own person, he wasn't born there.
Well, Rabbi Simon, the question is, how come these so-called scholars didn't use these books to reference to before they wrote the book of Acts?
You see, this is the problem, is because what you're seeing is gaps. What you're seeing is gaps in accounts. You're seeing, scribes come along and embellish the accounts, changing words here, a word there, a sentence here, and a line here and a line there, and before you know it, they've corrupted the text already, before we even got there. But that's not the only issue we have with the book of Acts. So we know a lot about the book of Acts. We know a lot because, like I said, that I spoke about Paul using the title, white wall, painted wall against the high priest in the book of Acts in chapter 23 verse 3. But then he apologizes. He realizes he's a high priest, because you're not supposed to speak against the high priest, right? But here we don't just have somebody speaking against the high priest. We have a whole episode written against the whole council. That will never be done in history. We will not, as Hebrews, if that was a Hebrew writing it, we will not write a whole account against a council defaming them.
You're signing your death warrant, really.
You're not permitted to do so.
That's slander.
Because what does the Torah tell us? You shall not speak against your leaders.
That's right.
So isn't that what's happening over here?
Exactly.
So this means that this was a Gentile who did it, not a Hebrew.
Someone who